I do now. So,
Oh, recording.
nice. Yeah, so I left Project Access about just 2 years ago now. And when I left, I was quite keen. I was very curious about AI, even though I knew I had very little knowledge about it. So I wanted to go and work for an AI company. I thought if I apply for enough, eventually someone has to take me, right? So I guess that's what I will be talking about today, even though I've just recently left actually to go into what is less conventionally referred to as tech, but still has some similar components. Hopefully my experience can be of value.
Sure. And just elaborating a little bit more on your education. So I know that you had non-technical education. So can you elaborate a bit on that, what you did and why you chose to go for a non-technical degree instead?
A non-technical degree?
Yes.
Yeah, of course. So when I guess most decisions around education sort of start when in high school. So it feels like a while ago now, but still that is where the story begins. When I finished high school, I'd done natural sciences. In Sweden, you have like this natural science segment, and you have a social science segment, and I'd done natural sciences. But I was very aware by the end of my time there that I wanted to spend more time on like a really I'd like to do a sort of rigorous social science degree or arts degree even. So at the time, I also had a scholarship to study Chinese in Beijing. So I did that for 2 years and was also trying to figure out where I would do my degree and what my degree would be in. And that's when I discovered sort of the excellent UK education system. And I met someone who'd studied history at Oxford, which eventually then inspired me to do the same after a few encouraging conversations with her. You can see the mentorship model in its very early phase here. So I applied to do a degree in history at Oxford, and that's what I did, which I loved, and I'm so happy I have that degree. But obviously, if you do want to get into the tech space, it becomes a little bit more challenging to when you haven't done much coding or any coding, and you don't really know about any sort of product management or anything else really regarding tech. So during my time at Project Access was really the first time I came into contact with that side of things. And we, even though neither of us were, I would say, particularly tech savvy at the start, we did sort of patch together this huge network of various different existing apps that we used these various APIs to talk to each other. So it was very, very low tech. But even so, it gave you an insight into how that worked. And so it was, I think, in weaving together a narrative around that I was able to then get into the space.
So is this where your idea to break into tech came from your experience of building your own things in Project Access, or was it also something else?
Yeah, I think the tech sphere really influences everything you read about startups in general. And so it's kind of like thought leaders and how to start a company and make it successful. So I was reading a lot of things by the great tech entrepreneurs on how to try to make things work and be very bootstrapped and put things together. So I was definitely coming into close contact with that sphere. But I think what I'd also realized, which informed my decision, was that I was a little bit, I was reading all these things about AI and I was kind of scared of it. I was like, this is huge. I'm terrified. So I think the best way to kind of see the beast for what it is to get closer and try to understand it. So I was interested primarily actually from a policy perspective in AI, and I thought, what better place if I'm not sure this is going to be my life, the best way to start is to get closer and find out if I want to study this, if I want to get closer to it from a policy perspective.
I see. So once you knew that you were interested and you knew this is something that you would like to do, how did you go about actually breaking into the industry?
Yeah, so the first thing I had to do, I think, was think a lot about what skills I had, what skills I had developed during my time at Project Access. So what was it that I was good at that not many other people were good at, and then sort of try to create a narrative around that. So I started there. I looked at the areas that were, and I think the benefit of working in a startup like Project Access is that you get to do so many different things. So you can build off of very, very many various areas that you've done a little bit of, and kind of craft as a narrative around that. So I did that, and then I applied to a bunch of different companies. And I think the benefit also of the tech industry is actually that if you get into a fairly small company, you can, and you show yourself to be keen and hungry and sort of hardworking, then you can get new areas of responsibility pretty quickly. So I think once you get that initial step into a role that you think is at least somewhat relevant for what you're hoping to learn, then you can actually get very far within those companies, because they're, well, if you're lucky, they're fast growing, and then they'll need people who've been around for a bit.
I see. And have you ever had doubts or maybe hesitations between choosing between the more kind of tech young world, or choosing more kind of set graduate path? So have you yourself ever taken part in graduate recruitment processes at university, or is this always something you wanted to go into tech?
So I didn't take part in those graduate recruitment things, mainly because I knew I was going to be working with Project Access. So I sort of saw that as my own grad scheme, was sort of trying to build something up and learning from that. So I haven't gone down that more conventional route. I think there are definitely benefits, and now I work in a company that has a bit more of a range in terms of age and experience, which is really interesting to me, because before I've worked in very, very young companies, and everyone's kind of just very, very hungry to grow things very quickly, which is good, but it's also really nice to have that sort of that mix of experience that everyone brings together. So I think I have absolutely no regrets, because it's amazing to work in that kind of environment, but it is also it is a privilege to get to try different things and now be in an industry that's where you rely on more senior expertise, and where you kind of need that. So right now I work in electric vehicles, where bootstrapping is not really an option. So you have a whole other ball game in some sense.
I see. So you'd say that your experience of the people you work with, or even their experience level, actually varies from place to place within the industry itself. Is that correct?
I would say that now I work in an industry that is less like a sort of classic tech industry, even though there are tech components, and there's a big coming trend in much more tech driven cars, but there is also this huge engineering side, which means that there is this other type of company kind of behind it, where you need to think about logistics and factories and material choices and procurement and 1,000-page contracts, and yeah.
That makes sense. So you yourself have mentioned that you worked in actually a variety of companies and variety of different roles within the industry, or let's say related industry. So maybe tell us a little bit more about why you decided to work in various companies and in various positions. That's kind of like my first question. And my second question is, how did you manage to learn quickly on the job once you actually got there?
Yeah, I think I've maybe changed a little bit too much in the last few years, but I think so I was CEO of Project Access for 3 years, and after that I was really keen to learn from other people. I thought, I want to see what it's like when I don't make all the decisions. I think the up and downside of having got to make all the decisions is that you become you ask a lot of the people who then manage the companies you work for, so you kind of expect to get to have a say, which is not maybe always the most successful way to drive change from within. I think some things take a little bit more time, but I've been I've been a little bit restless maybe in the last few years, so I've moved quickly. But I do think there is probably an upside to that as well, in that if you don't think you're going to be able to change the things you're not happy with, then there's very little reason to stay, right? So I think there is also the element of moving on until you find something that really challenges and gets the best out of you.
And when you find something that maybe you're not as passionate about, how do you know if it's just, let's say, company specific or that topic specific as opposed to field specific? Because I think that's something I faced a little bit, having done a startup, internship in a startup last summer. I wasn't sure if the things that I didn't like were representative of startups in general, as opposed to that specific startup.
That's a really good question. I think you can try to think of it in different ways. Like, if you can try to spend your time doing different tasks that you find more interesting, that also are really important for that company, then that's a really good way to find out. Like, if you are entrusted with this responsibility, does that change how you feel about it, or does that yeah, so it's worth maybe getting ensuring that you get different tasks if you think it might be the actual thing you're working on. I think a lot of it also comes in before deciding to go into an industry. Like, there's a lot of work you can do.
Hello.
Yeah, I think she's having some internet issues. It's not just me.
Yeah, I also thought it was just me. Makes sense. Okay, we can wait just a little bit. Hi, Paul. Hi. So Paul, you came at a perfect time of technical issues. So welcome to this very technical event.
Oh, thank you. Hopefully I didn't cause the technical issues, but yeah, hopefully Anna will be able to jump back on. Yeah, hello everyone. Just, I guess we'll form lead everyone in a little bit, but it's good to get here early and make sure I myself didn't have any technical issues. So.
Thank you for joining. And there was some strong correlation between you joining and Anna having internet issues, but I'll let you stay on this call, and hopefully Anna will join soon.
Yeah, if not, you can always kick me out. I'll come back.
Okay, so since Anna is still not here, maybe just tell us how are you doing?
Yeah. Well, maybe I'll do a quick intro until Anna comes back then. Hi everyone, my name is Paul Emil Dorsenville. I currently live in Copenhagen, Denmark. Oh, and Anna's back, so I'll let Anna finish, and then I can take over when she's done. I'll go back on mute now.
That was the perfect.
Apparently having some connectivity issues. If my time is up, that is completely fine. Very sorry about that.
No.
Take your
Paul
time.
actually Paul just joined perfectly as you left, so he had the time to introduce himself. But now you're back, so let you finish your story, and then we'll move on to Paul. So feel free to continue, Anna.
I think I was just saying, I think there are, you can do a lot of research before, if you speak to people in the industry, having coffees with people whose jobs you think you're interested in, and hearing about whether the things that interest them interest you. Those things are really, I did that a fair bit actually before before going into the tech side of things, because just to find out if those were the types of people I'd like to be working with. And so that was really good. And sometimes you get to hear about really interesting things and we'll be like, oh, this company is really cool, like check them out, they'll be hiring. So it's also a good way to find out about, because things change quickly in the space. So it's a good way for that informal knowledge.
I see. And now that you have worked in the field a little bit and of course moved between various different positions, what's your plan for the future? Do you think you will want to stay within the more startup part of tech in the future as well, or are you planning to move on to something else?
Yeah, I mean, now I work for a very different type of startup, so it's all about electric trucks. So it's a whole other, again, a whole new ballgame for me. But I'm really enjoying that, very, very fast learning curve, getting to get stuck in very quickly and trying to catch up. But I think in the long run, I'm still interested in policy. So this is kind of a really nice and informative few years for me at the start of my career. And then I imagine that when I get a little bit older, I'll want to use a lot of that, what I've learned to a super cool one. Very happy to hear you like Volta. Yes, I also really like it. It's a very, very interesting company. So I'm very happy so far. But yeah, in the long run, I still see myself going into policy. We'll see what happens. But yeah.
Thanks. Exciting. So just for now, actually tell us what your day-to-day life looks like at Volta, what your tasks are, and maybe especially what you enjoy, what you find challenging.
Yeah, so little caveat here, I only started a few weeks ago, so this may well come to change, but right now what I'm doing is I'm setting up our trucks as a service offering for London, which is basically, the thinking is that because we have all of these electric trucks that are going out to various different companies, they don't always know how to service them, and no one really knows how to service electric trucks because they don't really exist yet. So if you have a problem with an electric truck, it's very hard to know how to fix it. So we're setting up this ecosystem around it. So there will be sort of partners for financing, insurance, for all the maintenance bits. And then we'll have all these little mobile service units driving around to sort out any problem that anyone has. So it's a huge logistics piece, actually, just trying to figure out where in London we should be, which partners we should have, a lot of partner meetings, and trying to figure out the automotive industry, which is brand new to me. So yeah.
I see. And what did you find, say, the most challenging so far?
That most of my colleagues speak French. No, not just that, but also again, this feeling like an idiot is always a tough start. I think there are a lot of super clever people, and that's wonderful, but it does mean that you sort of spend your evenings trying to read up on like how this industry works, because you want to show your best. So it's that catching up piece again. That's yeah.
I see. And for anyone who would find themselves in a similar situation, right? So starting a new job, or not really knowing that much about the industry that they're becoming part of, what sort of advice would you give them? What kind of tips?
Yeah, I think most of the questions you have are probably good ones. So the moment you start feeling a little bit like you have a question, or you're starting to understand things, it's often time to start asking questions, because they will be welcome. And what is really nice about electric trucks is that even though there's so many people with experience in automotive, like building electric vehicles is so new to everyone, so everyone kind of has this humility. And I think that's the case for a lot of startups. Like even if you have experienced people, you're faced with this task that no one really knows how to go about. So asking good questions and sort of being persistent about getting to the answer, I think is usually good and usually appreciated. So that's why you're there, because you have a mind to think with and good questions to ask. So I think even though you feel like you don't know what you're doing, usually it's worth challenging people, like in a humble and nice way, but asking good questions and trying to get a good grasp of it.
That's really good advice, for sure. I think that's actually applicable to a lot of industries and basically starting anything new. So really very applicable. So with that being said, I think these are all the questions from me. Anna, if you'd like to give, let's say, one final message to our attendees, feel free to do so now, just to give you some time to conclude.
Yeah, I think whichever company you're interested, whichever industry you're interested in, think about why you're interested in that, and then you usually have a really good answer as to what you should write in your personal letter, in your cover letter, because you may not think you have the perfect background for anything, but I think a real pro of the startup space is that people care more about your attitude and your enthusiasm and your hard work than anything else. So I'd say go for it, and grab coffees with people you think are interesting, and you'll find out more about who they are and what they like to think about.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think these are great final words. And with that being said, I would like to welcome our next speaker, Paul. Paul, you already had a chance to introduce yourself very briefly. I think that is the perfect moment to fully finish your introduction. Tell us what you do, what your history was in the past.
Yeah. I will try to keep it brief on that end, but my name is Paul again. I'm currently in Copenhagen. I'll actually be moving to New York in the next month, so starting to pack up as much as is possible. I currently work for a company called Templafy, which is in the document automation space, which probably doesn't make a lot of sense to a lot of people, but I think with a lot of tech companies, we just do something in the background that a lot of companies use, but people don't really understand, which is actually kind of cool about it in a very unique way. I've been working for quite some time at various companies, including Google and Trivago and Booking.com and Citi and Goldman Sachs. I've worked a couple of different companies in different roles, but I really, when I joined Google after studying history, I really enjoyed the tech space, and I knew it was kind of where I wanted to be. I then went and got a law degree, realized that even though I was all right as a lawyer, it probably would be better at doing something else that more suited me. So I went back into the tech field and tried to merge a little bit of my law degree with kind of my tech interests, and it landed me at Trivago in Dusseldorf in Germany. Worked there to help kind of expand their US footprint, and then I moved to Copenhagen to do the same with Kayak and a company called Momondo, which was acquired by Kayak. And then I left a couple of years ago to join Templafy and to help them grow. We were a company of about 80. Now we're almost 400, I believe, in the last 2.5 years. Hopefully, we're kind of slowly inching towards a unicorn space, but I think that's what a lot of companies kind of pushing for right now, and hopefully we'll get there before the bubble bursts in that space. But it's really interesting, and I think a big thing for me, especially with tech, is that I look at the tech field and I look at most companies, whether they like to believe it or not, most companies are tech companies in a way or not, in one way or another. Law firms, we deal with a lot of companies in all walks of life, whether it's a Scania that really produces trucks, or a law firm. Like every company has a department that deals with their tech side. So every company is sort of a de facto tech company in a way. It's just the way the world is moving. I think the last year, if it's taught us anything, it's taught us that you can work and be super productive from almost anywhere as long as you have a decent internet connection. And I think we're learning that. And with Anna, in the EV space, some point we're going to have self-driving trucks and, making deliveries, and people will probably never have to leave home. You can order food and order groceries and, kind of sit here at your desk and do a lot of things. So, the tech space, it's funny that it's sort of a space unto itself, but the reality is everything's sort of tech. And that's kind of the approach I've taken and how I've looked at where I've wanted to be in my career and whatnot.
I see. I definitely agree with you that there's a lot of tech development going on right now. But I'm curious, why did you choose to study history and then law if you knew you were always interested in tech?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big things, it probably isn't the advice my mom would have given me or did give me when I was younger, and may not always be the advice that people give others, but I always say, study the things that interest you the most, because it'll make sense and you'll find connections with other topics and other things. And I think, when I studied law, for instance, people were like, well, what does law have to do with technology? Well, it actually has a lot to do with technology, and it's more about a way of thinking. Like, I think people who study law have a specific way of thinking that actually bodes quite well in the tech industry. History, I just really loved history, but on the other side, history actually gives me a way of contextualizing things that, in the tech industry, we actually do need a lot. So it may not, and I think it goes to a point that Anna was making in terms of, what to put in your personal statements. I think you don't necessarily have to be cookie cutter fit into the box. Like, I think tech companies are really great, and I think Google kind of started this trend of like finding people that don't necessarily fit into the box, but are going to be the best fits for their companies. And the idea that there's these requirements and you have to, to be an intern, you've had to have 10 years of work experience and things like that, I think are kind of going to the wayside, because people bring so much more to the table. Like, I think some of the smartest people I've worked with in business or in sales were engineers, or, studied art history, or did something completely different from what, one would expect. And I have some friends who, went to business school and are also great. Like, so it doesn't knock anyone out, but I think it also becomes quite inclusive of a lot of different ways of thinking, along sort of the spectrum. And I think that's really interesting about the tech space, because you don't know who you're going to meet at the other end who's created this amazing thing. So you have to sort of be open in how you communicate, your product, what you're selling, what you're doing, what you're creating, which means that the people within the company also have to be representative of that as well.
It's all true, definitely, and I think that's why a lot of people are attracted into the tech space. At the same time, the industry can be very notoriously notoriously hard to get into. For example, Google. So, what do you think made you stand out, and how do you think people can stand out when breaking into the industry?
Yeah, I mean, it is hard to stand out in the tech industry. I think, especially when you look at, a company like Google or Facebook or whatnot. I think it's the same thing when you're applying to like a really selective school, right? Like, what do you stand out? Did you play 3 sports and do all of these academic things? Like, I think having a uniqueness and having a passion is probably your best bet, and I remember, when I did my Google interview, one of my interviewees, I spent an hour and a half talking to them, and we talked about how I was a radio DJ. Absolutely nothing to do with Google. Like, I had put it on my resume, and I did this, and I hosted this show from this time to this time. He's like, you're a radio DJ. Tell me more about that. And I thought it was, standard interview. He just wants to hear that I'm a well-rounded person. And he's like, yeah, I did that too. And, we started talking about musical styles and genres, and we didn't talk at all about Google or business or tech. We just talked about music. And, I think people sometimes forget that, you have to work with people, right? You have to be their colleagues. Like, I have to sit next to this person for most of my week. I probably will spend more time with the person I sit next to at work than I do with my own family. So you really have to enjoy those people, and they have to be the right fit for the organization. And it's a two-sided, it's a two-way street. Like, you have to feel like you're a right fit, they have to feel like you're a right fit. Like, you can always learn quite a lot, but you can't change someone's personality. If they're a certain way, like, they're just a certain way, and that's okay. Like, that's not a good or a bad thing. For me, I feel like when I look in the hiring process, I want someone who, I want to be able to get into a room and challenge, and they challenge me, but then, go and have a beer with. And I think that a lot of people, when they're hiring or looking at candidates, especially in the tech world, because the tech world is notoriously difficult, but also notoriously fun. A lot of great ideas come out of, people just having just really open conversations and being fun. And I think you have to show all sides of who you are. You have to be well-rounded. Not only are they expecting you to have done really well in school and done great things in terms of academics and societies and stuff, but they also want you to do things outside. What are your interests? Do you go hiking? Are you a triathlete? Are you a runner? Like, if you're only focused on school, then you aren't really a well-rounded person, and that will probably show off in the way that you work. And you may not be a right fit for some of those organizations. So I think, just being who you are and being well-rounded is actually maybe the best thing you can do to sort of stand out.
I see. And I remember from our conversations previously that you also mentioned the importance of networking when breaking into an industry, and then when you are in the industry
Yeah.
itself.
Yeah, I think, I would say I'm actually quite a introverted person. I'm not really, not a huge networker by nature, but I think, especially in this day and age, um, it's a lot easier to network. I think a couple of years ago, without LinkedIn or Facebook was very early, and you couldn't network in the same ways. But I think now you really, it's so much easier to network, and people are, I think, quite relaxed about approaches, from people. And I think doing it in a really kind of clever or intelligent way is obviously the way to do it. You don't want to just kind of like, hey, like, hire me, give me an internship. But it's sort of, find people that you have interest with or you want to have interest with. And this is something like throughout your whole career, you should always do. I follow some people on LinkedIn, for instance, that, our careers don't really completely align, but they're just kind of interesting people, or people that have interests that are pretty cool to me. I follow a lot of people in artificial intelligence, and it sort of relates to what I do, but not really. But they have so many great things that they recommend and suggest, and you hear so many amazing things that way. So I think LinkedIn is actually becoming like an amazing tool. But I mean, Twitter, Instagram, you have so many ways to sort of reach out to people that are, a little bit different from how I had to do it back in the day, and actually go in and physically meet people for coffees. But I think, showing interest in what they do and being quite clever about it. If you want to meet somebody in the artificial intelligence space, and they've written papers or articles, I think using some of that, like, hey, I've read this article and I have a question on this specific point, or a thought about this. I think people are always kind of interested to hear more in those ways. I think just the standard approach of, hey, I just would like to learn more, they probably get 10 or 20 of those a day. But if you're really specific and are like, I read this, but I thought, actually, what about this, hypothesis or this thought, thinking more in the AI space. But, just I think being a bit more in depth with how you approach people, I think you will definitely sort of get good feedback and good reactions from that. And I mean, networking is, for better or worse, kind of something you need to do. Everyone needs to do it, and everyone needs to do it sort of constantly in their careers. I think even if you think, well, I've done fairly well in my career, I have colleagues from all over, you still will network. You still will sort of, always be part of that, kind of having people reach out to you. And now I'm kind of in a point in my career where people reach out to me, which is great. But I still reach out to others, and kind of learn what they do and hear about what it took to get them there and whatnot. And I think it's just a really, even if nothing comes of it, or even if for you it's like, oh wow, that's cool, like, and that's it. It's always good to sort of like keep those bridges intact and alive, because you never really know like how things will sort of come back or reconnect. And I've had, a lot of weird instances where people that I've met in one realm of my life have showed up in completely different world. And just like, hey, I remember that we used to work together so many years ago, and how are things going? I'm working on this project, like, could you help me out, or could you do this, or could you give advice? And that's always pretty cool, to know that you've made that connection with someone. And you're not necessarily going to become best friends with everyone, but I think if you have a good sort of coffee chat or a good sort of starting relationship, it's actually a pretty good way to get the ball rolling.
I see. I think my only the concern with LinkedIn specifically is that you always feel like there's some ulterior motive, that even if someone asks you about your favorite sport or your favorite, I don't know, you still know that there's like an internship motive going on.
Yeah, and I think, when, I look at people for internships or jobs, and I mean, of course, I know that sometimes that's the end goal. And that's okay, I think, to, I usually am pretty honest, like, hey, like, I am not going to give you this job based on like a coffee conversation, but that's, not necessarily, it's not a no, you're out of the pool. It's just, hey, this is, just an introductory chat. And I think a lot of times, people are really afraid of having these introductory chats, but I always look at it as, I'm gonna get like 30 or 40 or 100 resumes, cover letters on my desk. How do I separate out those 100 and put them in another pile of people I actually want to meet? And honestly, a lot of times, I think if you reach out, or you make kind of that approach, it's like, okay, I had a good chat with this person, I want to know a little bit more in a more formal setting. So it removes you kind of from one pile to the other, and now you kind of get your foot in the door. And I always used to have this sort of thought in my head that, hey, all I need is a chance. All I need is an interview. If I have an interview, then I'm in the game. And then when you're in the game, anyone has a chance, right? Everyone has an opportunity. And I think sometimes, a lot of times actually, probably especially in the tech world, with Google, AWS, Facebook, you tend to not get out of that first pile. So, if you get out of that first pile, you've already actually done fairly well. Because, it's, when you're talking about at Google, it's not 100, it's probably 1,000 people that have applied for that role, or 2 or 3. So if you're moved on into actually meeting and having an interview, even just a Zoom interview, like, that's a great initial start. And a lot of times, I know at Google they did it, is that, people that they've given interviews for, sometimes you don't fit the role or whatever, they don't necessarily put you back into the pile. They'll actually kind of, you'll sort of be, a little bit ahead of everyone else for future roles, because of course they've deemed you that you've kind of met their entry requirements or whatnot, right? So it gives you still a better chance if there are other roles that sort of fit. And I think
Mhm.
that's also something to think about too.
Mhm. And when it comes to demonstrating your interest in technology on your CV or during the conversation, during the interview, how does one actually do it if one
Uh,
hasn't studied anything tech related?
I mean, like I said, everything is tech related, right? Like everything. There isn't a single thing in this world almost at this point that isn't tech related. You know, I have a good friend of mine. He's a spine surgeon in Texas. Right now, he performs spine surgeries with robots. You know, like, but he did not learn how to do that. I mean, he studied for, I don't know, 17 years or something. And every surgery was performed by hand. And, you know, you cut, you do the normal things, but now he's performing surgeries with robots. And that is kind of the way that it will move. And at some point, you know, we talked about, hey, do you think, you know, you're going to be replaced by a robot? He's like, yeah, I don't think I'll be alive when that happens, but maybe one day. But almost everything in life is really tech related. So I think it's about finding those connections to, you know, what you've done, what you've studied, and how it relates. And sometimes the relations are, I don't want to say tenuous, but sometimes they're a bit abstract, right? You know, how does an art historian, you know, how could they relate to the tech world? But actually there are relations. Some of them are more obvious, you know, hey, you know, we're using AI, facial recognition, and actually art was one of the ways that they originally started working on that. Um, to actually like how you physically studied art history, you know, what are the concepts and thoughts, and how did you do, you know, a person who got a first or a 4.0 in almost any subject is a clever person, you know, like I can take a clever person and make them clever in almost anything at that point, because it means that they have a lot of the core skills to be successful in other words, in other ways. So I think, you know, it's just about showing like, hey, maybe I didn't study this specific thing, you know, I didn't study EV or I didn't study document automation, but you know, I'm a clever person and I have a work ethic and I have a passion to learn more about technology. And maybe it's just, hey, I look at stocks and, you know, I'm really interested in that. Like for me, for instance, I actually really love the EV space for Anna. And how I show that for me is I actually study them because I buy a lot of like EV stocks. So understanding like LiDAR and things like that, you know, probably are not things that I will use anywhere else in my career, but it's just like a passion that's outside of my normal sort of realm. Has nothing to do with law or history or document automation or anything like that. But you know, you have other interests, you have other passions, so you can bring those in as well. And I think people will see that. I think people are very good. Hopefully, the people interviewing, especially at these large companies, are quite good at picking up on those cues and seeing where people can be passionate, and then it's about how do I shift that passion into like, you know, the passion for what you're going to be doing here, right? So
Picking up on the idea of success, when you actually get into the company, so let's say Simplify, there you said 400 employees, what makes people successful within the company, you would say?
mm, I mean, it's a tough one, but I think the biggest thing is to like be fearless. Um, you know, and when I say fearless, I mean, you know, be fearless in terms of asking questions, be fearless in terms of, you know, saying you don't know how to do things. I think there's always this fear of not knowing and being afraid of what that entails. Like, oh man, I wonder if I don't know if they'll get rid of me or whatnot. And I always tell people when we hire them, like, I didn't hire you to fire you. I don't expect you to come in and know like how to drive a race car from the first day. You're going to learn and, maybe crash, try to keep the crashes to a minimum. And at some point, I'll expect you to start winning some races, but it's not going to be today. And I think that's kind of the approach, every one of us needs to have when we sort of walk into roles. And I think especially earlier in your career, of course, like that's the best approach. Of course, as you get older in your career and more experienced, it comes with more responsibilities and the expectations are much higher. But I think early in your career, a lot of companies, what they want to see is that hunger and that willingness to say, hey, I don't know how this works. Can you show it to me? Like for me, I have no issue showing something to someone new 10 times. But if 6 months down the line, if I'm still showing it to you, then there's something wrong. But, you really have to take the opportunity when you start to really ask questions. That whole idiom, there's no such thing as a dumb question. Sometimes you say, well, sometimes it's not true, but for the most part, it isn't true. Or it is true, sorry, that there is no such thing as a dumb question. Ask all the questions you need to ask. Say, I don't know how to do this. Say, like, can you show this to me? Meet people like all over the company. I think one of the things I've been really successful at wherever I've worked is that I've gotten to know almost every department fairly well and just a snippet of what they do. I'm not going to go into finance and understand accounting practices, but, I understand the basics of what they do and how it relates to my work and whatnot. And a lot of times I've served as liaisons to a lot of different departments because I understand that, and be nice to everyone. It's like very simple things, but the reality is being nice to everyone gets you a lot more than, I don't want to say being mean, but yeah, being mean. Was going to use another word, but yeah, being mean to people. And I think sometimes people forget that. When I was interning several years ago at Goldman Sachs, my mom told me one thing: should be nice to the people at the front desk and to the executive assistants, everyone who you think doesn't see you. And I had gone in for my interviews and whatnot, got the role, came back. First day, I'm meeting the partner that I'm going to be working with, and how, you're great, thank you. I'm so excited for this role. And they're like, do you know a big part of why we took you? I said, I don't know, grades, whatever. And they said, well, actually, of course, that side, but because you were nice to the person at the front desk. I said, huh, okay. And they said, you were the only person who spoke to them. You're the only person who asked them like how their day was. And I asked them, when you left after your interview, like, what did she think of you? And she gave you the thumbs up. I was a little unsure, but she said that she thought you would be a good fit and we took you. You don't know who that partner, who that director is going to talk to. And that person is one of their most trusted confidants. And of course the person's an executive assistant, doesn't have necessarily a high title, but that person is somebody they ultimately trust with these kinds of decisions. And something is kind of minuscule in some ways is saying, hi, hey, how's it going? Yeah, I can grab you some water, or, just being kind and nice and yourself actually went a lot further than I expected it to. And I think in general than, most people would think that it went. So I think those are some of the basics, but sometimes people forget that.
Yes, I think that these are really, really inspiring last words. Definitely, that's a being nice for yourself. I'll just let you say actually your conclusion. So any final words that you'd like to communicate to the audience?
Yeah, I suppose didn't really think I should have written down like a conclusive thought or sentence or something. I think the biggest thing is to not sort of like scare yourself out of applying for things or thinking that, having this fear. I think it goes back to this idea of fearlessness, right? You know, and I think especially coming from certain situations, certain parts of the world, certain educations, people have a fear that I'm not good enough or whatnot. But you know, I think technology has kind of shown it's this kind of great equalizer in many ways. And you know, not to worry about that. Like at the end of the day, you'll end up where you're meant to end up. To just give it a try. I think, you know, it's one of those very corny, you know, shoot for the moon, land amongst the stars kind of saying, but it's really, I think for me, it's helped, and I think for a lot of people, it's probably a good idiom to follow.
Thanks, Paul. As always, it's really inspiring to hear you talk.
Of course, anytime.
So with that being said, just pass on the floor to Aryan, who will lead the next parts.
Yes, thanks a lot for that, Mary, and thank you so much, Paul and Anna. I must say it was really inspiring to hear both of you. Especially, I must say, because I've been working for Project Access for like a while now. So like to hear from Anna and to hear from her, like what inspired her in the first place to start something like Project Access were really good. And from Paul, like as someone who's from a non-technical background and who's trying to break into tech as well, I think those were like some really good tips. And especially, I guess being nice is a universal thing, whether you're trying to break into tech or not. It's just being nice is nice. So, but I think that in particular is very important. So yeah, thank you so much for all of that. Next, we actually have a very special speaker. We have Pauline. So Pauline works with Amazon Web Services and as a data scientist, and she will be talking about her journey. She very helpfully also created a presentation for it. So yeah, and of course, if you have any questions, just let us know. Otherwise, I have 100 questions for Pauline, so I'll just go on and on. But if you have any questions, send me a message, and I can try to fit that one in as well. So yeah.
Awesome, thanks. Should I share my screen, or are you gonna share your screen?
Maybe you can try sharing your screen. If that doesn't work, I can try mine as well.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
It did work. Yes, perfect.
Okay, and it's just this part. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, I made a presentation today because one of my feedbacks that I got, I think it's really important on a side note just to get a lot of feedback about your career, whether it's at school or at work, and just ask for it. Don't wait for like a formal review. But one of the feedbacks that I got is, Pauline, if you can go on a tangent, you will go on a tangent. So I was like, I will need structure. I will create a presentation. So yeah, introductions. I'm Pauline. I am a data scientist at AWS, but I didn't come from like a really heavy computer science background. And if you don't know what Amazon Web Services is, it's the cloud computing part of Amazon. This means that companies can scale or reduce the amount of storage that they use on the internet. So for example, Netflix is a big user. So when they have more web users on their website, they use more storage on Amazon Web Services and less when it's less busy. Specifically, I work in the sports segment in the machine learning and AI division. So that's been really great for me as well, because it's super interesting just to see who is in sports. And then I work on their consulting side. So I work with clients to see how they can transform their machine learning workloads onto AWS. So a quick agenda today is that I'll just go over my personal background, breaking into tech, and then I'll answer any questions that you guys have at the end. So if you look from like a CV point of view or a resume point of view, it looks pretty linear, it looks pretty straight, and it seems like pretty easy. So I was originally born in New Zealand. I moved for university and high school in the States. So I went to Carnegie Mellon University. It's a very tech heavy university, but I came in with a business background. And then I switched majors at one point, and I eventually graduated in a Bachelor's of Science in Operations, so more like supply chain. And I did my master's at LSE. And then now I'm at the AWS graduate program. So it seems like everything was really easy. I got into all my universities. I knew what I was doing. But in reality, I actually had a lot of ups and downs. So I started off with a very pure business degree. I was actually in finance. I did an internship at Deutsche Bank. It's not even on my CV anymore because that's how much I hated it. Not against Deutsche Bank, but just how much finance is not for me. I ended up switching and thought I'd do in marketing a little bit. And I had a really great opportunity at Ernst & Young at an internship there. There I did some tech marketing for them. And decided, I really like the marketing space, but I felt really challenged by the technology there. And I didn't know what I wanted to do specifically in tech, but I knew I wanted to switch into something a bit more challenging or in that area. So I decided to slightly change my degree. So instead of being finance, I was focused on supply chain and operations and a little bit of statistics. But then because I'd only done that for like 1 or 2 years, I didn't really have that much experience. I graduated and I was like, I don't know what I want to do. Do I want to do a PhD? Do I want to do a master's? Do I want work? It was really confusing for me. I still had my offer from Deutsche Bank at this point, and I was like, that's not what I want to do. And so I ended up doing a master's in social data science. But to be really honest about my degree, I just spent a lot of time doing a lot of random things. So I took a course in quantitative text analysis. I took one in environmental sciences. I really took that 1 year, and I was very lucky to have a scholarship as well to attend, just to figure out what I wanted to do and just try the biggest range of subjects that I could. And then I ended up at AWS. And so I was very lucky to be in their graduate program. They decided that I would be a data scientist. I didn't get to really choose this, but it was really lucky because I really enjoyed the area. And one thing that I really enjoyed about being at a larger company, because I never thought I'd be ending up in tech at such a large company, is that I can talk to a ton of different people from different backgrounds. So whether this be UX UI, people who come in with supply chain, or people who come in with software engineering, I get to hear about their day-to-day, and also I get paid to talk to them. I guess that's another pro about being working now. And just to really meet as many awesome people there. So going back through my history, what have I learned in my experiences and I guess in my short career, because I've only been at Amazon Web Services about a year, and what did I wish I'd known earlier? So first is that I learned to keep on learning. So while I did get a master's degree in terms of formative education, it's actually not necessary, especially within tech. There's a lot of websites or a lot of like recruitment, they'll say that you'll need a degree in tech, but the reality is that you don't actually need one. You really just, as previous speakers had said before, really show your passion in that area. Especially since going back to my Deutsche Bank, I spent hours at my internship working until like 10 p.m., 11 p.m. and I could do it, right? Like we're all hardworking people and you'll do when you have to, but if you're not really passionate about it, when you're working those late nights, you're just going to be like, this is terrible, I kind of want to leave. And so when I say keep on learning, it's also find what you're interested in and really find what makes you excited. And so there's a number of ways to keep learning. So you can do like self-learning, attend a boot camp, online courses. I have a friend who studied political science at her bachelor's. She ended up at a boot camp for like 2 weeks. It was really coding intensive. And then she worked for the Alan Turing Institute, which is the National Institute for Data Science and Artificial Intelligence in the UK. And then now she works at the UN. So completely switched careers just because of this 2-week boot camp. And then something else that I'd say is that if you don't really come from if you're not getting a tech degree, something that can really help is getting a certification. So if you get like an online course, they give you like a certification online, but also I'm at Amazon Web Services, Google does it, Microsoft does it. They offer a number of certifications to prove that your passion in that area. Getting a certification is not a guarantee that you'll get the job, but it definitely helps. Like, for example, if you're applying to like Amazon and you have an Amazon certification, it's like definitely a step up already. The second thing I would say is to narrow down your options. There are thousands of different job titles out there in the tech sphere, and I think tech encompasses so much. So the first thing is you can narrow down first by like professional careers. So do you want to do UX UI design, data science, cybersecurity, account management? There's a lot of different areas within tech. And this just ends up being trying in things that you may or may not like. So one thing recently for me that I've learned is that I never want to go into cybersecurity. I really like seeing the tangible results of my work. So for example, on machine learning, I can see the metrics of when a model's been improved or not. But for cybersecurity, it's like when things are all peaceful, when you can't see anything is when it's best, because that means your security is running. And so I didn't really like that as much, but I got this opportunity by asking someone if I could shadow them for a week. So it might just be shadowing, interviewing others on their day jobs, networking. So this is a really great way to narrow down your options. A second way to narrow down your options is to look at your interests. So for me, I'm very lucky because I work in the sports industry at Amazon Web Services. So I work with a lot of our larger customers, like in football or motor racing. And so this makes me very excited to like, keep on working. And I never thought I'd actually get that opportunity. But there's also different industries as well. So I have a friend who is really like passionate about media, and she's now working at Disney. So it's having this opportunity of like combining your personal interests with tech, because tech is everywhere. My third tip is that projects to get as much experience as possible. So I'm a full interviewer at Amazon. If people come to Amazon, if people want to apply to Amazon, I might be your interviewer. But I've also had offers and been through the interview process for Google, Microsoft, Facebook, like all the major tech companies. And more during the interviews, I find that they're switching to more project-based questions. So instead of asking like, oh, in a binary search tree, can you find this or something like this? Rather, they're going to ask you to describe a project that you've worked on. And then they're going to really dive deep into that one project and be like, oh, why did you choose to do this instead of this? And what was your reasoning for this? And so this is where sometimes not having a traditional background in tech may hurt you. So you'll have this lack of project experience. However, because now that it's more project focused now in interviews that I'm seeing, you can easily gain experience. There's tons of people, like tons of nonprofit organizations that focus, Girls Who Code, AI for Good, all these different organizations that you can start working on just to gain experience in that area. So I worked for about identifying malaria in cells in blood samples. And I just did that by like going to this one random meetup for tech, and it's just 2 hours a week. And then it looked really good on my CV, and I got to talk about it. And it was getting these opportunities to have these types of projects, and you don't need a degree for. I had another friend who also created analysis of just all her messages that she had for the past year and different emojis that she used, and she could plot like her different moods throughout the different seasons. So it's even just like personal interest to make sure that you can get these projects to fill your CV. Another great opportunity is hackathons. So if you would rather just take one weekend away and just get a project done through a hackathon, that's also a great way as well. And then lastly, my biggest tip is be comfortable with being uncomfortable. So coming from maybe a non-traditional tech or non-traditional background into tech, you may feel a lot of this imposter syndrome. And I definitely feel this a lot more with girls who are in tech than guys, where they feel like, oh, maybe I'm not the best person for this project, or they're a bit shy in speaking out or taking responsibility. And I still see myself do that as well. But it's really normal. Tying this back to my first tip, keep on learning. Tech accelerates at a super fast pace. 5 to 10 years ago, people use iPods, and now no one uses an iPod. It's all connected with your phone. So even the experts in the fields are still constantly learning. And so you just be comfortable that you may not feel like you belong, but you definitely do. It's also really crazy, at these tech companies, whether it's startups or larger companies, that if you're just being honest and you say like, hey, this is what I've learned, I'm a little bit uncomfortable, people are willing to trust you and will take a chance on you. So I've worked on one project on MLOps. MLOps is like how to deploy and maintain machine learning models in production reliably and efficiently. and I've only done one project on it. And then in 2 weeks, I'm going to give a presentation to 22 consultants who work at Accenture about how they can do ML ops. So for me, it's super crazy that now they trust me to give this presentation. And it just ties back to like, you know, you're going to be put into uncomfortable situations. You may not feel like you belong, but, you know, just be honest, you know, keep working. And if this is something you're really passionate about, it'll all work out in the end. It's like where you're meant to be. And so that's all my questions or my presentation.
Yeah, thank you so much for that presentation, Pauline. I must say I really liked the graph specifically. Like, first I was like, oh, there's linear growth, and then suddenly it was very truthful. So that was really nice, and thanks a lot for that. I definitely have a lot of questions. So I guess the first question that I have is, so you mentioned that you were working for AWS, and you gave us a rough idea of what it's like as well. But you said you work in sports, so I would love to know a little bit more about what kind of data analysis are you doing in sports. Specifically for me, I'm a big Formula One fan, and I know AWS has been working on something with F1, but I don't really think I know in full detail what that is. So yeah, what is it?
Yeah, hold on. How do I stop sharing my screen?
One second. There should be if you go towards the top, there should be like a stop sharing button.
Maybe this might be me.
Or what I can do is try sharing my screen, and that would stop sharing your screen.
Perfect.
Yeah, give me 1 second.
Yeah, so Formula One has a lot of different projects with Amazon, and so I'm trying to think about their other projects, but I think one of their first projects was working with so some things are more public and some things are more private, but a lot of their more public ones are like their graphics. So they'll have a lot of insight graphics about how much energy it takes to overtake someone or what are the chances. And then there's something that recently got announced, which is their new generation car. So in terms of Formula One, they have new regulations coming in to make it more fair for more of these teams. And so they have a new generation car that they produced with Formula One that just got announced on Friday, I think. Personally, what I do is a lot of their computer vision. The projects aren't public, but it's seeing how we can use driver or like camera footage that Formula One has, and you know, make really great products out of that for Formula One.
Wow, that is extremely exciting, and I don't know if it's exciting for other people. It's definitely very exciting for me. But yeah, thank you so much for that kind of insights. And I guess that kind of breaks the myth that tech is only for people who are not into sports and nerds, because clearly tech is affecting sports in a very clear manner and tangible manner. So that is very interesting. But yeah, going back to a little bit more about your history. So what exactly did what exactly pushed you to be like, oh yes, Amazon is the place I want to apply, and what is it specifically about Amazon's culture that you find so attractive?
Yeah, so first, what specifically about Amazon that made me want to apply? So I was looking for a number of graduate programs, just so that I knew that I was new to tech and I kind of wanted a bit more support in the beginning of my career. So I looked at a lot of these larger companies, and something that really drew me to Amazon's graduate program is that it was a bit longer, but it was also a guarantee of a job. So like even like it was still full, there's no like, oh, you had to reapply at the end. In addition, their graduate program had a lot of different sectors. So there was, so it's one graduate program, but it includes cybersecurity, networking, developing, data science, or project management. And so for me, I really wanted this because, you know, I could see the different areas that I could explore or could talk to. And so for me, that was really amazing. Something that I really enjoy about Amazon's culture is people's willingness to like talk to you about anything. I've had numerous conversations, especially, you know, within the sports practice, with people who came in who used to work at like the Olympics, and they organized the Olympics, and now here they are in Amazon. And so I was talking to them about what it takes to be an organizer at the Olympics. So it was really crazy just to hear all their experiences, and like backgrounds as well. So one of my mentors, I have 4. Another tip: get as many mentors that you think is useful. But one of them, he doesn't have a degree. He like never even went to a university, and now he's at Amazon. And he was like, well, I just kind of accidentally fell into tech. And so I really love that about Amazon, is that it's full of really diverse people, and they're all willing to talk to you about anything.
Yeah, so that is something that I found about Amazon as well, that you can just reach out to anyone in the network, and like most people are willing to talk, including Pauline. So so that is definitely one of the benefits of working with Amazon. And yeah, and then thinking specifically about data analysis, do you think there's anything particular? So let's say I'm thinking of breaking into tech, and I'm coming from a non-technical background. Why say data analysis over traditional programming or just traditional development, and maybe why specifically AWS?
Yeah, so for me, I really chose data science, machine learning. I kind of fell into it by accident and also on purpose. So for my graduate program, they placed me in it, but also I'd taken some courses in data science and data analytics, and I wanted something that could be applied in a lot of areas. So data science is definitely one of them. And second thing that I really like about data science is that you have hard metrics. So unlike cybersecurity, which is measured by like number of breaches that you could have, data science could be like, I improved my model by 50%, and then you can see the model run and you can see the tangible impact. And for me, I really wanted to see that. Like I wanted something that I could interact with, tangible. I'm a very visual learner. So seeing this, like machine learning models in production is something that I really was interested in. And I'm still kind of exploring like really what I want to do as well. So I've recently gone into the computer vision area, and I really like that as well, though it's very theoretical heavy and very math heavy. So it's a mix of like my interests are still growing, and also like trying to see where do I see this in the future? Like how is data science going to change in 5 to 10 years?
Yes, that makes a lot of sense, and I guess that's why like data is the big word that everyone loves to talk about. So thank you for giving us some insights into what it actually is. Otherwise, we just hear the buzzword and we like data, data and cloud, and I guess you're at the intersection of both. But speaking of, can you give our attendees like a brief overview of what your day looks like? So yeah, just what does the average day for a data scientist at AWS look like?
Yeah, so I'm lucky because I'm a data science consultant, so I still have that social aspect as well. So this role was really perfect for me because I still wanted to be interacting with people and not just coding all day. So for me right now, I'm working on a large bank. And so a typical day for me means that I start off the day talking with that client in the mornings, usually for 30 minutes. We usually say like, these are the goals that we want to set out. So I'm doing MLOps for them. So how are they going to run machine learning in the cloud? And they'll have maybe a specific requirement. And then I'll take, 4 to 5 hours with my team where we just kind of peer code. So we're just going to say, oh, this is what I think, this is what they wanted in their template, drafting like a visual board of what I think they'll want in the pipeline. And then taking each of us will take a little part of that and then combine our code at the end. Obviously, it's not as easy as that. Usually there's bumps along the way. And then at the end of the day, I usually regroup with my client and ask them like, this is where we're going. This is what we thought about. Does this work? And so that's kind of a little bit of how that day looks like.
No, that sounds like an absolutely amazing day, and I think the bumps are what make them the most interesting, because then that is when all the creativity comes out as well. And I guess the final question I have for you is, if you could give us some insights into the recruitment cycle. So you talked about the graduate program with AWS. I'm sure a lot of people are interested, including me, into how you go about applying, going through that process, and how do you apply. And also, I believe Amazon has this unique form of interviews called the panel. So if you could even give us some insights into how that works, that would be really interesting.
Yeah, so I'll go mostly through the graduate program. It's a little different if you're a non-graduate. Similar, you still go through a panel. But in terms of the graduate scheme, you should look to apply in the fall. So I think August, September is when it opens. The earlier you apply, the better. Not just because of like numbers, but just because like, yeah, it's mainly because of numbers, because you know, there's more, usually it's a rolling basis. Like they have a certain number of spots that they have, and this is for most companies, and they'll try to make sure that there's still some spots left for later on, but the earlier apply, you know, the greater your chances. And then you'll have a phone interview. Oh, you'll have your recruiter will review their CV, usually in pair with one consultant or that person on that team, and then they'll move you on forward if you pass to the phone screen. When you get to the phone screen, they'll probably just talk you through basic behavioral questions. Can you describe a situation when you worked in a team? It's really not technical at all. And so this is something that I also really liked about Amazon, is that they are willing to teach you the technical details. They're willing to take a chance on you in a sense, but they figured they can't teach you personality, similar to what Paul said. So it's very focused on the behavioral, and Amazon loves their 16 now leadership principles. They learn the leadership principles if you want to go into Amazon, and this is very true for like most companies. They take their like core values very strictly, but Amazon's interviews are all based on the leadership principles. And so then if you make it to the final rounds, you'll get a panel. So you'll have 4 interviewers. And I really like the way Amazon does their interview process, because there'll be 4 candidates and 4 interviewers, and then you'll just rotate between the 4. And so that means all 4 candidates got the same 4 interviewers. So it should be a pretty standard process across all these candidates. So you're not being like, oh, I just had an unlucky interviewer. It's because the other 3 will also have had the same. And I mean, it's a bit different now with virtual, but when it was in person, that's what they did. And what happened there is that they would they will go through your projects and your CVs, but they'll also align them with certain leadership principles. So for example, if it's like bias for action, they'll try to dig out like the projects or, you know, experiences that you've had when you showed bias for action. So Amazon does not play with their leadership principles. There's 16 of them. You don't have to memorize them, and like just have a scenario for each leadership principle.
Perfect. That makes a lot of sense. I love how formulaic the entire process is, like especially like how you said, like there are like four panelists and you go through all of them. I remember reading that apparently there was a lot of emphasis on Amazon when Prime Video started, that even television shows should follow this formula, and that have like some interesting discussions with talent. But I this is in general a very interesting aspect of Amazon's culture. But yeah, thank you so much for that insight. Now, if anyone from the panel has any questions for Pauline, we can go ahead.
Yes, I actually have a quick question about your master's degree. So I know that it's a lot of a lot of people have questions whether they should make that expense, because it definitely is expensive to do a master's course. So why did you decide to do it, and do you think it's necessary to transition from a non-technical background into a technical background?
Mm-hmm. So for 2 things, one, I got a scholarship, so I didn't really have to pay for my master's degree. But in terms of getting a master's degree, it can help. So, but where it will help is only the first, like the CV review of your interview process. It's not going to help you on necessarily on like the panels at Amazon, but this is just going to be like in terms of like all these big companies that if you apply to, like Google, Facebook, they just see so many CVs that having like a master's degree could help. Am I saying it's worth the money? Not necessarily. If, for example, you don't want to spend that much money for a master's degree and you're not really sure about it, then you definitely don't need to. If you can build your CV through other projects that are really, really interesting or that are unique, then that can definitely take the place of the master's degree. In terms of Amazon's eyes, you don't need a master's degree. In fact, I think most of the people in the UK office in my graduate cohort don't have a master's degree. It's a bit different with COVID now because people decided to stay in school longer. But the way that they do it is that they'll try to look for projects. And so one girl worked on a malaria project, and there's ones about like, one did, I think she did like housing crisis or flooding in the UK project. And so having that can take the place because it will show that you still have the technical depth or you're interested in that area. So while it can help, it's not necessarily going to help you all the way to the end. It will help just in that first initial CV review. And then second is that you can totally don't need one if you don't want to spend that much money.
I see. Thank you.
Perfect. And thank you so much for that, Pauline. If you have any final words, you can say them now, or yeah.
Oh no, I didn't really prepare. I guess, tech is really big, so just keep on searching for what you like or what you don't like. Don't be discouraged. It's always changing, and so I think a lot of people view these big companies as like the end all, like, oh, I have to be at Google or something like this. And that's not necessarily true. There's tons of opportunities out there in tech.
Perfect. And with that, we come to the end of our part with Pauline. Next, of course, Pauline talked a lot about how much tech changes and how it's always in there's always a flow happening, and there are always like new innovations happening, etc. And next up we have, so for people who attended yesterday, they would know about this organization already, but for those who did not, Academy. So we have two people from Academy. We have Vyoma, who is actually also from TA, excitingly, and we have Grace, who are going to talk about Academy's unique program, which helps you break into tech. So along with the insight that all of us speakers have given us already till now, they should be able to give us even more specific tips in terms of how Academy can help you and how in general you should go about this journey. So yeah, how about we have you guys introduce yourselves and what Academy does?
Sure, thanks, Ariane. Do you want to start, Vyoma, with an introduction?
Yeah, sure, I'll go for it, Grace. So a bit about me. I studied chemical engineering at UCL. I graduated in 2019. And in my final year, I had the option to do an elective outside of chemical engineering. So it's always quite into problem solving, and that's also why I gravitated towards chemical engineering in the very beginning. But I started attending various sorts of conferences and events in my free time, and they were sort of discussing things like working at a startup, was working at a corporate, and I think these sort of discussions around tech and how there are sort of endless opportunities within tech, and what Paul was sort of saying earlier about every company is sort of perceived to be a tech company in this post-digital world, it just became very sort of interesting to me, and I became really sort of attracted to the fast-paced nature of the tech industry, and I just wanted to educate myself more on it. So anyways, I was linking back. So I did the elective on mastering entrepreneurship because I've been quite interested in entrepreneurship. And it was really fascinating because during the elective, they would bring up speakers who had founded their own startups, and typically they were tech startups. So that was a good introduction for me into the world of like tech and tech startups, and I continued to go on to various networking events, just sort of educate myself more on fintechs and the fascinating work that they're doing in terms of disrupting retail banks. And I became really fascinated by thinking about what kind of career I want. And I knew I wanted to be in an industry which was future-proof. And I wanted to be in an industry which was also very sort of fast-paced, very innovative, and challenging the status quo, because there was sort of lots of various problems I could kind of see. And that's why in my free time, I would sort of volunteer at organizations such as Project Access. And it's really interesting because even Project Access itself, it's essentially like a tech non-profit startup, right? Because we have like our technical products, and essentially for every organization, or to be trying to sort of solve a solution at scale, you'll need technology. So I then knew that I sort of really want to sort of move into a career in tech. And also in my final year, I was reading a book by Meg Jay, I believe she's the author, and it was called, I think, how like the defining decade, and how the 20s are a defining decade. And she was talking about it's very important to choose the jobs in your 20s where you are gaining the skills that you want to acquire, that will really set you up for success long term. So I knew that I long term I'd love to be an entrepreneur. So I thought, okay, it really helps working for a startup, because I'll kind of get to see behind the scenes, like how does a startup go about scaling? How does it go through that process? And also working for like an early stage startup. So upon graduation, I was successful in getting a job at this B2B SaaS tech startup, which specializes in workforce analytics. And my role was essentially a data analytics consultant. And it was really, really great. And it's kind of sort of echoes what Paul was sort of saying about definitely finding mission alignment. And I think definitely for tech startups, I've sort of noticed that they do really value mission alignment. So I definitely really valued what they were, in particular, the problem they were trying to solve. And they were really eager to sort of teach me and upskill me. And I found that to be really great. So I was doing that for about a year and a half, and I really enjoyed my role. But one thing I kind of did find sort of frustrating is in my role, it wasn't necessarily very technical heavy. So I was communicating and doing a lot of data storytelling, using the product that this company was working on, and using that to solve the clients' issues that we were working with. But I felt sort of a barrier sometimes between the work I was doing and communicating effectively with the data scientists and those also working on the product. And I started to realize that there's this really big communication barrier. And I started to sort of realize that I think people who will be very successful long term, and the kind of roles I want to be in, like executive leadership positions long term, they will need to be able to communicate with a variety of stakeholders. So they will need to be able to have very good sort of managerial skills, they will need to have a good sort of commercial skills, and also be able to communicate with those technical stakeholders. And that really helps if you're able to sort of have some sort of technical literacy and be able to understand somewhat of the code and be able to kind of like understand the technical aspects of the product. And also I was quite interested in sort of pivoting into product management. And I knew that to kind of break into product management, it would really help if when sort of forming the product, I can kind of like really understand the technical implications that will sort of have and how that will impact sort of more technical software engineering based teams, etc. So towards the end of last year, Academy reached out to me, and I had not heard of Academy, and Academy itself was in its infancy, and they were doing user research. And they were designing this program, which Grace will eventually go on to sort of telling you more about. And they were just sort of wanting to do some sort of user case study to kind of see what kind of people would be drawn to this program and various things like that. So that was also my first exposure to Academy. And I would say very sort of serendipitously, once I started to understand more about the program, and I kind of realized that it's sort of definitely the skills that I want to be working on is more gaining more technical proficiency. And also I definitely want to gain more sort of managerial skills. I kind of found the program to be like a great, to be fulfilling that sort of sweet spot. So I knew that I wanted to go through the program, and I also had this opportunity to be part of the founding team. So I worked with the founding team for like several months, working through like their various business needs. So that's a bit of like a kind of a flavor of what I've been up to and my journey through tech and sort of how I've like approached careers just generally. So happy to sort of expand on anything as we sort of go on, but I hope that's sort of given you a flavor about me. I'll pass over to Grace.
Thanks, Mayoma. That was, yeah, a very good introduction. I think your journey into tech, you know, you've had a lot of experience with tech so far, I think, and it was a very thoughtful journey as compared to mine. So I also graduated from UCL. I studied molecular biology, and towards the end of my degree, my choice was to either go into sciences and to do kind of lab-based work, or to go into medicine, to look at consulting, or to look at banking, which is what a lot of other people did. And I didn't find that to be a very I didn't expect it to be a very fulfilling or rewarding role based on the kind of role that I wanted to find. So I realized that I wanted to be able to create like more tangible products, or, you know, in this case, something that I could produce and it be on the app store and be like, you know, look, this is what I produced, you know, in more of a tech-based environment. So I wanted a role which used that analytical side of my degree whilst also being kind of creative and having a people-based side, which is, you know, a lot of different areas to combine, but I think tech can really provide you with all of those different areas. And I think it is dangerous, like moving throughout, you know, like university and school, we're being like trying to pinpoint this very small area of like a huge industry that we want to go into, but that doesn't necessarily fulfill all the different skills that we want to use within a role. So I had to think a bit more broadly. I looked at marketing, and I then, because that kind of involved like analytics and also the people side of things and would allow me that creativity. So that's kind of where I came to. And I was a president of a society called Free Hype, and we made like marketing materials for social enterprises and charities who we thought had really cool missions and values, and whose name we wanted to get out there using our, you know, marketing materials. So yeah, I thought I wanted to move into marketing, and I worked within a startup on like SEO, but I didn't really enjoy it so much. So I started to research UX, which is user experience, which is like research into finding out why people might like a certain product and how to improve that product. And that's kind of why I was headhunted by Academy, because they noticed I was interested in UX, which is obviously like involved in the product management sphere. You'd have like software engineers, you'd have people who understand the business, and then people who are UX. So I recognized that, kind of similar to what Vioma said already, like I want to be able to develop the skills which will allow me to be an entrepreneur in the future potentially. So I wanted to gain this technical skill set so that I would not have to like outsource that tech skill in the future. So yeah, my role at the moment, so I was meant to move into the May cohort as a scholar, and I went through that whole process, but Academy then offered me the position of an intern within Academy, which involves recruiting people through the process, and then being community ambassador, which is like looking after the cohort essentially, which is similar to what Vioma did. So I'm doing the program starting in a month's time. So we're going to speak on like, you know, what recruitment looks like from my perspective at the moment, and then Vioma will obviously be able to pitch in with like what the program itself looks like for her and what she's learned.
Perfect. That all sounds very interesting, and especially I love how you painted the picture of how technology is the perfect intersection of people, your skills, and I guess that's a general interest. So, and I guess that's exactly the place where I'm coming at it from as well. As someone who's studying philosophy, politics, and econ, there's not a lot of places where all three meet, but when they do, it is absolutely beautiful. So yeah. Next, yeah, I guess we can just continue talking about what exactly the program is all about. But before we do that, could you tell us a little bit more about, because both of you talked about this, who is a product manager, and what does product management involve in tech?
Do you want to take that one, Vioma?
Yeah, sure. So I think what's really interesting is if we sort of look maybe at sort of an example of, say, like Spotify. I think most people are familiar with Spotify, even like say Netflix. So essentially the product is going to be the platform, and in Spotify's case, it's going to be the platform which hosts like all the different music that we can choose to stream. So there will be, but within that, there will be sort of many sort of mini products, because someone will be working on like various different features. So like one thing quite interesting is also, I guess, like pivoting to like a recent example, is I was reading about, so I use Gmail quite frequently, and nowadays on Gmail, if I choose to, if I said something like, oh, like please find attached, but I forgot to make an attachment. Now, before I sent my email, I got this sort of alert saying, oh, you said that you were going to attach something, but you haven't attached it. So that's, again, someone is sort of thinking about this product. That's a product manager, right? They have seen that actually consumers of the Gmail platform, this is like a common concern. Sometimes they will say that they're going to attach something, but it's not actually been attached, and that's an issue. So I would say like a product manager is someone who is very sort of mindful of the consumer's needs and is working on sort of either sort of creating that product or improving that product, and working with various stakeholders. So be it technical stakeholders, so in this case, you'd be working with software engineers, because it'll be the actual software engineers who will do the actual coding and designing that sort of alerts and knowing when that should come up, or working with business commercially to kind of see if what they're trying to do is commercially viable, etc. So I hope that somehow sort of illuminated an example of like what product manager can do. Product management, it does vary, I would say, in different roles and across sort of various different sectors, but it's essentially someone who is designing the product and is improving upon the various iterations of the product. So we can even see that with, say, the iPhone. So like the iPhone's got some like facial recognition, and like we've got like Apple wallets and various things like that as sort of the product has been advancing.
Perfect. That sounds like a very interesting role, and I guess that's like whenever you're using a product, you're always thinking, oh, if only it had this, or if only it had that, and then it's very interesting that there's literally a person whose job is literally to be like, if only it had this. Okay, let's do that now. And I must say the amount of times that you forgot to add that attachment, the feature has saved me so many times. So I definitely see the value of product managers there. Yeah. So, but getting back to what is the Academy program, and what do the two of you, like, what kind of benefits are the two of you getting by being part of the program?
Yeah, so the program itself, so it's like a 2-year technology and leadership program, which empowers, high potential graduates from non-computer sciences backgrounds to train as junior software engineers, so like full stack junior software engineers, whilst also developing soft skills, so like leadership and things like that. So it was obviously something that was of a lot of interest to me, because I wanted to gain that technical skill set, whilst also developing those soft skills, which I think aren't talked about enough, and I think are really, really important in making you feel comfortable within the tech industry, especially if you haven't studied a degree which is like relevant to the tech industry. Like there's a lot of imposter syndrome around entering the tech space, especially with the lack of representation of certain people. So I think those soft skills help to kind of explore like why you're doing what you're doing. You always have to work within a team as a junior software, as like a software engineer or just someone within tech. So to be able to communicate what you're doing is really important as well. So those soft skills help in all those different elements. So yeah, in practice, what that kind of graduate scheme looks like is, firstly, we go into like, it's kind of part-time training to kind of ease you into the program. We have people come from a huge range of different backgrounds. So gets everyone knowing the community and the faculty and feeling comfortable asking questions around tech. And then it's full-time training, and then we support you in being placed within a professional placement as a junior software engineer, which I think is really, really cool. And it's all fully funded. So yeah, I'm super, super excited to get started on it, but I will pass over to Vayoma to give us a couple more details on like what she's learned so far.
Yeah, no, definitely. I will maybe sort of like try and use this opportunity to sort of extend as well as to like why I'm kind of going through the program, etc. So it kind of links in quite nicely to sort of what I was sort of saying as just like a preface as to how like I'm taking a very sort of skills-based approach, especially as I'm sort of in the infancy in my career. And I sort of highlighted from like my previous job, I really understood the importance of for the kind of career I want to gain more technical literacy, as well as to like gain more sort of people management, that sort of skill sets. So those are all things that I was trying to sort of explore and do in my free time. But also one thing I found really overwhelming is so that I was sort of hearing people sort of saying that it's really great to sort of like do these courses on like Udemy or something. But sometimes I just get kind of like overwhelmed with like just the sheer amount, right, of like courses that are available. And then sometimes I see syllabuses that are a bit different, and I wasn't even sure like how does that translate then from doing a course, like how that translates then like getting an actual job in like a technical role. And I found it just a very sort of overwhelming sphere to just sort of navigate. And also I was then contemplating, should I maybe like look into maybe doing a boot camp and sort of use that as investment? But a lot of boot camps are highly expensive, and there's sort of a trade-off, right? And I was sort of thinking, is that like I'm not sure if that's something I like. So I was sort of a bit sort of unsure about if that's the right decision for me at that particular point, etc., etc. But what I really quite liked about Academy's program, the product that they're essentially building, is how they are sort of giving this sort of safe space. And first of all, like, scholars are being paid to go through the program. So whilst you're training, you're like receiving money to financial support, which I think is really important, even from like inequality perspective, because those from like disadvantaged backgrounds, it's really highly unaffordable to be not getting paid, and like the amount that you'd have to pay for a boot camp. So I really like that perspective of what Academy was trying to do. But I also quite liked like how the course was structured and how it really sort of breaks down to you what's most relevant to learn right now in terms of wanting to become like a software engineer. And also it's the way in which it's sort of been built. It's very much mimics what life in industry is going to be like. So there's a lot of collaboration, there's a lot of like working in agile teams, there's lots of pair programming, various things like that in terms of the technical side. And I thought it seems better than, for instance, me sort of in my spare time, like trying to sort of navigate and doing like a Udemy course, when actually the way in which I'd be learning or the way I'd be working isn't similar to like how it would be in industry. And in terms of like the leadership side, one thing that I really, really liked is just sort of cultivating that self-awareness. So we have had support from like even having our own sort of personalized like coaching sessions. So every single month we have like a coach, and this person was a previous executive at Google, and now he's like a leadership coach, and we have like 1 hour individual sessions with him, and it's been really sort of transformative having sort of personal development in that sense. We have like a speaker. Recently we sort of moved on to the program and exploring public speaking. So we have like a public speaking expert from New York who has worked with like top CEOs, and he's training us on public speaking. We've learned about how to like manage team meetings and like various things like that. So I've definitely really seen the value of learning all of these things, because my experience of working in a startup, a lot of these things are things that I was sort of trialing or trying to like mimic from other people and seeing the best practices and what they were using. But I never really received like formal training. And I really saw the value of undergoing the program right now is doing this deep dive, not just in tech, but also this deep dive in really people management, because I think definitely to like accelerate and catalyze your career, the higher you sort of go up the ranks, the more emphasis it really is on these sorts of things, on people management, public speaking, holding effective meetings, how do you interrupt someone in the meeting in the best way, all of those sorts of things. So I've definitely seen so much value from the program so far on that basis. And then what really happens is that you go through this program for a few months, and then after that you will then be matched with an employer partner. So I guess Grace will be best suited to maybe like to talk a bit about that.
Yeah, I just want to add one quick thing as well. I think you gave a really great overview of like all the values you've seen in doing the program, but I think one extra one that is super important as well is like the network that you build in doing this program. So we are both in cohorts of around 30 people, and as part of our roles we act as the community ambassadors, which mean that we plan events for our cohort to make them feel really, you know, like just to feel that they can like connect with each other. And I think having those people who you can talk to both within the program to ask questions to and to reach out to, but also further down the line who all came from the same position as you, and you know, all learn alongside you at one point, is really, really valuable. But yes, to move on to kind of the phase 3, which is like the placement stage. So yeah, Academy supports you in being, as I mentioned, like placed in this professional environment as a junior software engineer, and then you enter into like a contract with them for 20 months. And I think it's an amazing part of Academy as well is that they provide you with this placement so that and they have this long view on scholars so that they follow your development, you know, throughout that period as well, and keep you supporting you whilst you're learning, you know, in that environment as well, which is, I think, you know, based on the other courses that I looked at, is super rare. really valuable. And yeah, Academy's got some really cool like partner companies who they're partnering with to place scholars within. So yeah, it's super exciting. Yeah, that's kind of the program, I guess. Is that really
yes, thank you so much for that insight. I must say the program sounds immensely interesting, and I guess the amount of value that it's getting to you and to all the participants sounds very good. I have 2 questions I guess everyone has right now, which is first, what kind of companies are we looking at for these placements, and like more in a more long-term note, like what happens once you finish the program, what has generally been like for people who passed the cohorts? And the second question I had was how exactly do you make an application?
Yeah, good questions. So Academy is an early stage startup, and we have been going for about a year and a half now. So we've had the first cohort, which was named Cohort 0 in like a very techy way. They are doing phase 3 at the moment. So they're the first cohort who we've had placed with companies. And can you imagine, and as you can imagine, there was kind of, from these partner companies, we're trying to train people in a 4-month time span to be as adept as people who've studied, computer sciences for 4 years. They had doubts around whether people would have enough technical skills and also the soft skills to be able to perform within those roles. So we kind of attracted smaller companies at the time, more kind of startups, but given like the really great feedback that we had from them, we are attracting like larger companies at the moment. So the kind of companies that those were, we had Beryl, who is a sustainable e-bikes company, Faculty.ai, so they use AI to help, inform, companies' decisions. And there are large companies who are in conversation with at the moment, but I won't disclose them. But they will be up on the website, so you can see them. So could you repeat the second? You had like 3 questions.
I'll
I'm
add
sorry.
to what you said. Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
Grace. I'll just also add to that. So I think what Academy is really trying to do is really ultimately sort of have this like roster and range of companies, and have like a mix of some sort of earlier stage companies. So those might be sort of seed funded, Series A, have more sort of hyper growth companies, unicorns, and established companies. And the aim being is when the sort of scholar is going to go through the matchmaking process, sort of like kind of like dating, I would suppose. Like you sort of have an introduction to these sorts of companies, you'll sort of filter through it. It's based on your sort of values. People value different things, right? Some people really put sort of emphasis on being sort of mission aligned. Some people know that they might really want to be working at sort of earlier stage companies. Some people might prefer sort of working at much more established companies where there's a lot more sort of structure for them. And then sometimes people have different sorts of preferences. For instance, people might gravitate towards like fintech, etc. So I think the aim that Academy is really trying to have is really trying to like build this huge roster of various companies, so that ultimately scholars can really sort of make that best sort of decision for themselves. And also it's really nice because I definitely, and that's one of the reasons why I even joined the founding team, was because I struggled in breaking into like a tech startup. It was very sort of difficult, and I'm very grateful that I was able to, but it's definitely something which is very hard. And I think even working at companies, like for instance, we hear about like tech giants like Deliveroo, etc. Like I would not know, like when I was at uni, like how on earth would I like break into like such a company. So it's really great that sort of Academy is not only just sort of making tech leadership more accessible and providing that training and paying you for that training, but also making companies more accessible, which previously was totally off the radar for like recent graduates. So even sort of the companies, startups, sort of Grace sort of mentioned, they're very sort of like off the radar.
Yes, that does sound very interesting, and I guess especially like learning more about all of these terms like pre-seed, and learning about all the companies that are up and coming. I think that all of that sounds very exciting. Templafy was an example of such a company, I guess, which is again very exciting, and it was really good to have a speaker from there as well. But yeah, so could you tell us, I know we're almost running out of time, so could you quickly tell us about how exactly can we, as soon as we get off this meeting, how exactly do we go onto the website, and how exactly can we increase the chances of being selected into the program?
Yes, yeah, for sure. And time has gone so quickly. That is so crazy. But I will run through the application process. So, you know, I'm a recruiter within, you know, Academy at the moment. There's a couple of different processes to the application process, and we aim to have as much one-to-one time with the candidates as possible so that we can like look into these traits. We try to remove, you know, all the computerized elements which might be, you know, used with a lot of different companies, which aren't, you know, very rewarding for people to go through. So let's say you are interested in Academy, what I would recommend is going onto our website. It's just type in like Academy Tech into Google and you'll be able to find it's the first result. And there's like a little box at the top where you can press apply, and then you have to fill in a couple of different, you know, questions. And then following on from that, you would have a call with me. We just get to chat to each other. We can figure out whether like the program is best for your, you know, aspirations going forward, and I can answer all the questions and doubts and queries that you have. And then I kind of see you throughout the application process. So following on from that is another interview which you have with one of two different people, and then it's like a casual conversation again to get to know you, and then more formal interview questions. And there's also a Thrive assessment, which is like a psychometric test. And the final element I think is really important. It is kind of like Academy's version of an assessment center. So it's a virtual 2-day training event as taught by the faculty in a similar structure to like what the program will look like, which helps give you an indication of whether you actually enjoy the program. So to speak on the kind of things that we look for, we look for people's potential to thrive within this program. So we, as I mentioned earlier, we have people come from a huge range of different backgrounds. Anything that's non-computer science is basically you can apply. And we have people from like STEM, non-STEM, linguistics, I don't know, you know, sciences, literally every background we've had them come through, which I think, you know, is really great as well, because you get such a range of perspectives and backgrounds on tech, and the way that people like approach problems is really interesting. So the kind of traits I would say we could fit into 4 different buckets. Firstly, I'll talk on like obviously a demonstrated interest in tech, and then secondly, and like that demonstrated interest can you can be creative as to how you demonstrate that interest. It can be courses, it can be that you've like shown an interest in a certain, I don't know, improvement within a certain tech product recently that you can explore or you can tell us about. We love like chatting about anything tech related. Yeah, and as well as that, the second thing I would say probably your ability to like communicate, to be a rewarding person to work with. Obviously we work in small groups. A demonstration that you can like build rapport with us, you know, is really important to us as well. Someone who's like inquisitive and likes to question things and loves learning. And finally, like someone who has an interest in personal development, because we have that coaching element as well. So those are kind of the traits. I would say, yeah, do you want to add anything to that, Boma?
Yeah, no, I think you did a good job sort of walking through like the application process. And I think it's really nice that Academy have that like Academy Nano, that assessment center sort of equivalent, because what that's trying to do is really replicate what life would be like if you were actually sort of going through the program. So I think it's rather than sort of hearing about like how do you work in a team, they like to like just see it for themselves and sort of give you a flavor of how faculty like to sort of like teach and what that's sort of going to be like. So I think it's the recruitment process has been really curated very sort of carefully. In terms of just generally for those who are really interested in sort of like working on understanding more about tech and getting more experience like for their CV, etc. What I would suggest, and really echoing what sort of Anna and Paul were saying earlier about definitely being very sort of curious and really trying to like understand about the various different roles. So that's exactly what I did, and that's why I was sort of emphasizing that I went to various sorts of events, various conferences, and I did the same thing with other industries such as like banking, consulting. Like I really wanted to sort of make a well-informed decision, reach out to people either in my immediate network or just try and find people. I would try and like find communities as well where I find a lot more like-minded people. I guess and that's another reason why I really did really like Academy as well, because it's like another really great community of diverse thinkers who all want to be like tech leaders. But other communities I've been part of is, so Code First Girls is a really great community to undergo like programming courses, and I've done a fellowship with them. And it's even like sort of, if you do have some sort of programming experience, even men can sort of apply to be instructors there. But that was a really great community. I attended like various events at LSE, Imperial and UCL, and like entrepreneurship events and various sort of tech societies. And if these aren't happening at your university, then think about like creating that, because essentially what tech is sort of doing is, right, there's a problem and it's coming up with a solution to that problem, right? And the first step is an idea to a problem, and then you're going to have like the technologists like creating that at scale and coming up potentially with that sort of proof of concept. But I would definitely suggest sort of that bias to action, which Pauline was even talking about, because that's something that Academy is really looking for. And also bear in mind Academy specific, since it is sort of looking for people who will be future leaders, definitely sort of demonstrating some sort of leadership experience. And that's really sort of doing what, so kind of think about it, like don't do sort of what the average are sort of doing, try and think about how you can sort of be above average and how you can be very sort of proactive. I think would be incredibly helpful, and even sort of thinking about self-development courses, etc. That's another way in which you can really show suitability for that side of things. But definitely, I think when it comes to gaining technical literacy, if you are going to like dabble into doing courses online or like learning through YouTube, I would really echo what Harrison was saying yesterday's seminar about how it's really important to make sure you're really interested in what you're doing, because now that I'm sort of like working on projects, I find it most rewarding when I'm working on projects where it's like the output is something I'm really sort of interested in. So whether I'm creating some sort of like web application, it's really interesting if I'm going to be creating, like figuring out how to like create a search bar, because I can, it all links into like creating this product that I want to have. So you're more invested in it. So I would definitely sort of recommend that people go for like project-based learning, but not just sort of copy projects or do what they think is impressive. Really think about something which they think could be solving some sort of problem, or even if it's something like forming like a blog of your favorite places to travel, that's again still really interesting. And like then figuring out like what would be the sort of the micro components of doing that. So that's sort of a bit more of, I guess, a comprehensive way of thinking about how you can